And our team on the ground were literally contacted by some families in desperate need who had literally fled the border. So this week I came over to meet some of the families that we've been helping for the last few weeks and last few months. And it was beautiful. I sat and had a meal with this beautiful set of families that we've been accommodating and helping to get food and now helping to get them the right legal paperwork. But hearing their stories has just been heartbreaking. So one of the ladies was a 7-month pregnant lady who had to walk for 5 days to get to the border. And our team were able to get to her and help her, but she ended up giving birth prematurely because of the amount of stress on her body having fled the Taliban. Thankfully, mum and baby are both well, and so I literally sat and held her 4-pound tiny little baby this week. She's called Sarah, the little baby, and she's healthy and she's strong and she's clearly a little fighter. But to hear their stories of how their whole lives have just been left behind. Another one of the married families that I was working with, I think he was in his last semester of medical school, so he'd done almost 5 years of training in the last semester when all of a sudden the Taliban came and completely closed down the whole schools. And because he's a Christian, he was on the watch list. So again, he's had to flee. So we've got him in safety now. We're accommodating, looking after him. But all of a sudden, he's now in another country where none of his paperwork stands. He didn't qualify because he was in his final semester. And so his whole education has just been taken from him. And so it feels like he's just got to start all over again. And to sit and eat with them and hear their stories firsthand, it's one thing watching it on the news, but then suddenly seeing it up firsthand is really heartbreaking, to be honest.
So just on that then, when it comes to that fear, how real and tangible is that fear? Because I suppose it can be one of those things, like you say, we see that people are fleeing and there's panic, but how real is that fear?
Yeah, absolutely. The people we're working with have literally gone through incredible terrors and incredible hardships. So one of the families, he was a police officer, and just because of the role he played when the Taliban came in, they didn't want him. And so again, he and his wife had to run for their lives. And they're literally arriving to us with just the clothes on their back. You know, we're watching mothers sell their babies because they're now on the brink of starvation. And just seeing what people are going through here, it's very real. You know, the Taliban are still a terrorist group. These are not a government. These are terrorist people who are literally terrorizing innocent people's lives.
Now, you mentioned earlier about the young man who was a Christian. So when it comes to that, are you finding that a lot of people who are getting in contact and needing that help tend to be Christians?
Yes, I mean, it's mixed, if I'm honest. So even people who are of other religions are still having to flee for their lives too. So it's not only Christians that have been penalised. However, Christians are very much on the watch list because they stand up against a lot of what the Taliban obviously believing. And so, yes, some of the families that we work in are Christian, but equally, as I say, there are other people who have different faiths too.
And just talk to us about the support that you're providing there, because I mean, you mentioned that you're meeting with these families, but what exactly is One by One doing to help them?
So we've been for the last couple of months now providing their accommodation, providing their food. I mean, these people are arriving with no paperwork. They're arriving with the clothes on their back. And so even just the process of now getting them legal papers and identities, that's a long process. So we're helping them with that process. But while that process is going through, we're also housing them, we're feeding them, because they've got no way of getting access to paying rent or buying food. And so One by One is doing all that for these families.
Becky, tell us a bit about the mood in Afghanistan. Are people quite sympathetic to the situation of the Afghan people who are fleeing the Taliban? Is the government quite welcoming of these people?
If I'm honest, we have to be quite sensitive there. So because they're arriving without paperwork and documentation, we have to be very careful. And so are working through the process of getting them the correct documentation so that then they can be accepted or at least migrated legally into other countries. And so that's a big part of the work we're now doing, and our team on the ground are working hard at that. So it is still quite a sensitive thing in terms of where we're housing them is a secure and safe place that they're almost hidden, if I'm honest, until we can get the right documentation in place for each of these families so that they can then fly on to other nations or start getting access into Pakistan so they can start gaining employment and renting a house here, all legally.
And finally, but most importantly for us, Becky, how can we be praying for people who are fleeing, like you say, some horrible and stressful situations? And how can we be praying for you guys at One by One and the work that you're doing?
So one of the practical things is we're still have a number of people stuck in Kabul. So one of the big prayers is that we can start getting flights for people to get them out. We've got particular families stuck in Kabul with very young children that we're really trying to get help for. So that's a very practical thing to pray into. And then also just praying for our team's safety. You know, while I've been here, we've been very safety conscious. So while I'm on the border, I will wear their clothing. I don't speak, team speak on my behalf, so people presume I'm a local. Obviously now I'm back in the city, so it's a little more safer for me. But certainly for our team who are there day in, day out on the border, these people are risking their lives to help people. So praying for protection, praying for wisdom. We would really appreciate prayers for that. And any support anyone is able to help us, then that would be greatly appreciated too.
Becky Murray, founder of One by One, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Pleasure, thank you.